Picture this. Somewhere in the vast bureaucratic nightmare that is the Galactic Safety Bureau, a filing clerk named Blimp Noodlewisk is having the worst day of his 17-tentacled life. He's supposed to transport a human infant to Cuddleton Prime, a planet so peaceful that flowers apologize when you pick them. Instead, through a series of cosmic clerical errors involving smudged ink, a coffee stain, and what can only be described as spectacular incompetence, baby Kira Thornwick ends up on Mortifax 7, a planet so deadly that even the dirt has a kill count. The Galactic Safety Bureau classifies planets on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is basically a pillow fort, and 10 is your atoms will be rearranged into modern art. Mortifax 7 is a solid 15. The atmosphere is 90% sulfur dioxide. The gravity could crush a freight hauler, and the local wildlife considers nuclear waste a light snack. The planet's tourism board gave up and became funeral directors. But here's where things get interesting. While any reasonable species would have the decency to die within minutes, humans have this peculiar habit of adapting. Little Kira, barely 6 months old, looks around at the landscape of perpetual volcanic eruptions and acid rain, and apparently thinks, well, this seems cozy. The first sign that something extraordinary was happening came when Kira befriended a Mortifax death worm, a creature so venomous that its scientific name literally translates to "please don't even think about it." She named it Squiggles. Squiggles, a predator that had terrorized the local ecosystem for centuries, became so devoted to this tiny human that it started leaving her dead animals as presents, like some sort of apocalyptic house cat. By age 3, Kira had learned to speak Mortifax death worm through a series of interpretive dances that would have made professional xenolinguists weep with joy. She also discovered that the planet's famous acid pools weren't actually that bad if you knew how to pH balance them properly. The locals, a species of sentient crystals called the fragmentoids, watched in AW as this small pink creature turned their homeworld's most deadly features into playground equipment. The fragmentoids had survived on Mortifax 7 for millennia by hiding in underground bunkers and praying to their gods for mercy. They emerged from their shelters to find Kira using their sacred temple of eternal suffering as a jungle gym. She waved cheerfully at them and offered to share her lunch, which consisted of what appeared to be roasted flame beetle larvae served on a bed of poison moss. The fragmentoids, who hadn't eaten a proper meal above ground in 3,000 years, politely declined. "Oh, you're vegetarians!" Kira exclaimed, her voice carrying the kind of innocent enthusiasm that would later make seasoned diplomats break into cold sweats. "I can make you a lovely salad." The salad consisted of 17 different species of carnivorous plants, each more deadly than the last, arranged in what she called a friendship pattern. The fragmentoids, faced with what was essentially a bouquet of death, made the only logical decision. They declared her their new goddess and built a shrine in her honor. By age 8, Kira had established what could generously be called a routine. She would wake up at dawn, pet her collection of creatures that existed solely to end life, tend to her garden of plants that would make biochemical weapons manufacturers nervous, and then go for a swim in the lava lake of eternal torment. The lava, apparently, was just the right temperature for relaxing. She also discovered that Mortifax 7's famous screaming crystals weren't actually in pain. They were just trying to warn everyone about the planet's dangers. Kira taught them to harmonize instead, and their warnings became what she called safety songs. Visitors to the planet would later report hearing hauntingly beautiful melodies just before being dissolved by acid rain, which was somehow both horrifying and oddly comforting. The turning point came when Kira was 16. Captain Wobbleton Fizzbottom of the Galactic Safety Bureau arrived in his state-of-the-art rescue vessel, the "definitely not going to explode this time," to retrieve what he assumed would be the skeletal remains of a long-dead human child. His mission briefing had been simple: collect bones, file report, get promoted. Instead, he found a cheerful teenager who greeted him with fresh-baked cookies and a smile that could power a small star. The cookies, he later discovered, were made from ingredients that could theoretically fuel a spacecraft. The smile was somehow even more dangerous. "Oh, wow! Visitors!" Kira exclaimed, bouncing with excitement. "I hardly ever get visitors." "Well, except for the doom wasps, but they're just here for the nectar." "Would you like some tea? I make it myself." Captain Fizzbottom, a veteran of 37 rescue missions, took one look at the steaming cup she offered, and his survival instincts began screaming. The tea was a pleasant amber color, but it was also glowing and making soft hissing sounds. When he politely declined, Kira looked disappointed. "Oh, that's okay. Not everyone likes molten core blend. How about some juice instead? I squeeze it myself from the local fruit." The local fruit turned out to be the reproductive organs of a plant species that used controlled explosions to spread its seeds. The juice had a pleasant fruity smell and the consistency of liquid dynamite. Captain Fizzbottom began to understand that he was dealing with something far beyond his pay grade. "Miss, Kira," he stammered, "we're here to rescue you. You've been stranded on this Deathworld for 16 years. Kira tilted her head, confused. "Deathworld? But this is home. Sure, it's a little spicy sometimes, but you just have to know how to handle it. Like Mr. Bites-A-Lot over there. He's really sweet once you get to know him." Mr. Bites-A-Lot was a mortifax bone crusher, a creature that looked like someone had crossed a rhinoceros with a wood chipper and then given the result anger management issues. It was currently napping in a patch of what appeared to be sunshine, but was actually concentrated solar radiation that would have fried any normal organism instantly. That's a Class A extinction event predator," Captain Fizzbottom whispered. "Oh, Bites-A-Lot. He's a big softy. Watch this." Kira walked over to the creature and began scratching behind what might generously be called its ears. The bone crusher, capable of crushing starship hulls with its bite, began making a sound that was either purring or the dying gasp of a fusion reactor. It was impossible to tell which. The rescue mission had suddenly become a diplomatic crisis. How do you evacuate someone who doesn't want to be rescued from a planet that should have killed them 16 years ago? More importantly, how do you explain to the Galactic Safety Bureau that their filing error had created what appeared to be the most dangerous human in the known universe? Captain Fizzbottom decided to try reason. "Miss Kira, with all due respect, this planet is incredibly dangerous. The atmospheric readings alone should have killed you years ago." "Oh, that? Yeah, the air here is pretty thick, but you get used to it. Actually, I think it's helped my lung capacity. I can hold my breath for almost 20 minutes now." She demonstrated by diving into what appeared to be a pool of liquid mercury. She emerged 30 seconds later, completely unharmed and somehow more cheerful than before. The captain's medical scanner was having what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. According to his instruments, Kira should have been dead from at least 47 different causes. But she was instead showing vital signs that suggested she was in perfect health. Better than perfect health, actually. She appeared to be thriving in conditions that would liquefy most life forms. "Perhaps," Captain Fizzbottom said carefully, "you'd like to see what other planets are like, just for comparison?" Kira's eyes lit up with excitement. "Oh, like a field trip. I've always wondered what other places are like. The fragmentoids told me about planets where the ground doesn't try to eat you, but I thought they were just being silly." And so began Kira's introduction to what the rest of the galaxy called civilization. Her first stop was Mellowton Station, a space station known for its peaceful atmosphere and strict safety regulations. The station's motto was, "Nothing exciting ever happens here, and that's just fine with us." Kira stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately began attracting attention. Not because she looked unusual, humans were fairly common in this part of the galaxy, but because small animals and plants throughout the station began responding to her presence in ways that defied explanation. Flowers bloomed more brightly. The station's recycling systems began working at peak efficiency, and the cafeteria's food somehow tasted better. "This place is amazing," Kira exclaimed, looking around with wonder. "Everything is so gentle. And look at all these people. They're so pale and squishy. Are you all okay? You look like you need more sunlight." The beings around her, who considered themselves perfectly healthy, began to wonder if perhaps they were looking a bit peaked. A Fluberian diplomat, who had been feeling perfectly fine moments before, suddenly became concerned about his vitamin D levels. Kira's first cultural experience came at the station's most popular restaurant, the Bland Spoon, famous for its completely inoffensive cuisine. She ordered something called Mild Flavor Surprise, which lived up to its name by being surprisingly mild. After one bite, she turned to the waiter, a nervous twitchling named Flibber. "Excuse me, but I think there might be a problem with my food. It doesn't seem to be trying to kill me at all." That's the point, miss," Flibber squeaked. "It's supposed to be safe and pleasant." "Oh," Kira looked thoughtful. "How interesting. On Mortifax 7, food that doesn't fight back is considered spoiled. Do you have anything a bit more active?" The chef, overhearing this conversation, took it as a personal challenge. He prepared his spiciest dish, the mildly zesty pepper medley, which had a spice rating of 2 out of 10. For context, most beings found this dish uncomfortably warm. Kira took a bite, and her face lit up with joy. "Oh my gosh, this is delicious. It's like a tiny little tickle on my tongue. Do you have anything spicier?" The chef, now intrigued, brought out his secret weapon, the moderately warm surprise, a dish so spicy it came with a warning label. The restaurant's record holder had managed 3 bites before requiring medical attention. Kira finished the entire plate in under 2 minutes and asked for seconds. The chef, a being who had dedicated his life to the pursuit of culinary excellence, began to question everything he thought he knew about food. "Miss," he said, emerging from the kitchen with something that looked like it was glowing, "I prepared this for a Pyrothian ambassador last month. His species evolved on a planet of living fire. He couldn't finish half of it." The dish was called Inferno's Regret, and it came with its own hazmat warning. Kira tried a spoonful and smiled politely. "It's lovely, very warming. Do you have any hot sauce?" The restaurant's entire staff gathered to watch as Kira consumed a meal that should have required emergency medical intervention. She chatted pleasantly between bites, commenting on the interesting flavor combinations and asking if they had any recipes she could try at home. "The secret," she explained to the mesmerized crowd, "is to let the heat roll over your palate instead of fighting it. Same principle I use with the acid geysers back home. You have to work with the danger, not against it." A galactic food critic who had been dining quietly in the corner began frantically taking notes. His review would later be titled, "The Day I Witnessed a Redefinition of the Scoville Scale," and it would fundamentally change how the galaxy approached spicy food. But the real incident happened during dessert. Kira had ordered something called Sweet Harmony Cake, a dessert so gentle it was often prescribed for upset stomachs. She took one bite and immediately began to cry. "Oh no! Are you hurt?" Captain Fizzbottom rushed to her side, certain that something had finally affected her. It's just so beautiful," Kira sobbed. "I never knew food could be this kind. Back home everything wants to eat you back, but this is just giving. How do you make something that only wants to make you happy?" The chef, who had been prepared for complaints about his spicy dishes, found himself completely unprepared for someone crying over his dessert. He began to tear up himself, though he wasn't entirely sure why. I just wanted to make something nice," he stammered. "Well, you did." Kira beamed at him through her tears. "This is the most generous thing I've ever tasted. No wonder you all look so peaceful. If I ate food like this every day, I'd probably be peaceful too." The restaurant's patrons, who had been watching this exchange with growing bewilderment, began to realize they were witnessing something unprecedented. Here was a being who had spent her entire life in conditions that would terrify seasoned space marines, and she was moved to tears by a simple dessert made with nothing but kindness. Word of the human who cries at cake spread throughout the station faster than a reactor leak. By the time Kira finished her meal, a small crowd had gathered outside the restaurant, hoping to catch a glimpse of this strange being who found joy in the most ordinary things. But the real revelation came when Kira tried to pay for her meal. She reached into her backpack and pulled out what appeared to be a small crystal, perfectly clear and beautiful. "Will this cover it?" she asked innocently. The crystal was a Mortifax diamond, formed under conditions of extreme pressure and temperature that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. It was worth approximately 17 times the restaurant's annual revenue. The chef stared at it in shock. "Miss, this is incredibly valuable. Much more than your meal cost." "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't really understand your money system yet. These are pretty common back home. The fragmentoids give them to me for my birthday every year. I have boxes of them." Captain Fizzbottom, who had been monitoring this conversation with growing horror, began to understand that Kira's backpack might contain enough wealth to destabilize the local economy. He also began to realize that removing her from Mortifax 7 might have been the most economically disruptive event in galactic history. "Perhaps," he suggested carefully, "we should discuss the nature of interstellar commerce." And so began Kira's education in the complex world of galactic economics. She learned that most beings couldn't simply walk outside and pick up diamonds from the ground. She discovered that food wasn't supposed to fight back. She found out that air was supposed to be breathable without extensive conditioning, and that most species considered surviving to be a reasonable life goal rather than a daily warm-up exercise. But perhaps most importantly, she began to understand that her mere presence was causing what Diplomatic Corps would later classify as beneficial disruption on a massive scale. The incident that really put her on the galactic map happened during her visit to the Celestial Peace Gardens, a meditation center known for its calming atmosphere and gentle wildlife. The gardens were home to serenity butterflies, creatures so delicate they were often used as metaphors for the fragility of life. Kira was admiring a particularly beautiful specimen when she noticed it seemed lethargic. Without thinking, she gently cupped it in her hands and began to hum a little tune she'd learned from the fragmentoids. The butterfly perked up immediately, its colors becoming more vibrant. "There you go, little friend," she whispered. "Just needed some encouragement." What happened next would be studied by xenobiologists for decades. The butterfly began to glow with an inner light, its wings shimmering with colors that didn't exist in the visible spectrum. Then, impossibly, it began to sing along with Kira's humming. Within minutes, every serenity butterfly in the gardens was glowing and singing. The harmony they created was so beautiful that visitors began weeping openly. The garden's meditation sessions, which typically help people achieve mild relaxation, were suddenly producing enlightenment experiences that would have made ancient philosophers jealous. "How did you do that?" whispered Brother Tranquil, the garden's head monk. "Oh, that's just the friendship song. All living things like to sing together if you know how to ask nicely. The deathworms taught me that harmony makes everything feel better, even if you're about to eat someone." Brother Tranquil, who had dedicated his life to understanding the mysteries of existence, began to suspect that those mysteries might be solved by a cheerful teenager who thought about to eat someone was a normal part of musical appreciation. The Peace Gardens incident made interstellar news. The headline read, "Human teenager accidentally achieves enlightenment for several hundred beings while trying to cheer up a butterfly." The article was filed under both xenobiology and inexplicable phenomena. But the real game changer came when Kira decided to help with what she saw as a minor problem. The space station's waste management system had been struggling with an infestation of cosmic rust mites, microscopic creatures that ate metal and reproduced faster than they could be eliminated. "Oh, that's easy," Kira said when she heard about the problem. "You just need to introduce a natural predator. Back home, we had similar issues with the tungsten termites." Before anyone could stop her, she opened her backpack and released what appeared to be a small, glowing beetle. The beetle, which she called Nibbles, was actually a juvenile Mortifax void cleaner, a creature that existed primarily to consume things that shouldn't exist. Within 6 hours, the cosmic rust mite population had been completely eliminated. Nibbles had also optimized the station's recycling systems, improved the air filtration, and somehow made the gravity generators run more efficiently. The station's chief engineer, a Blobalonian named Grex, found himself simultaneously grateful and terrified. "Miss Kira," he said carefully, "that creature of yours, what exactly does it eat?" "Oh, Nibbles isn't picky. Mostly he likes problems. The bigger and more complicated, the better. He's very helpful that way." Grex began to understand that Kira's definition of helpful might need some calibration. He also began to worry about what would happen when Nibbles ran out of problems to solve and started looking for entertainment. The next morning, Grex discovered that his concerns were justified. Nibbles had apparently gotten bored during the night and had decided to improve the station's communication array. The result was that Mellowton Station could now receive transmissions from 17 different dimensions and had accidentally established first contact with 3 previously unknown civilizations. "Kira!" Captain Fizzbottom burst into her quarters, waving a communicator that was somehow translating languages that didn't exist yet. "Your beetle broke the laws of physics." "Oh my! Did he hurt anyone?" Kira asked, genuinely concerned. "No, but he's accidentally solved 17 major engineering problems and created at least 3 new ones. We're receiving messages from beings who won't be born for another 1,000 years. Well, that's nice. Future people are usually very polite. Did they say anything interesting?" Captain Fizzbottom stared at her for a long moment, then sat down heavily. "They want to know if you'd like to join their temporal engineering project." "What's temporal engineering?" "I have no idea, but apparently you're already famous for it in the future, and they'd like to meet you at your earliest convenience, which could be anywhere from now to the heat death of the universe." Kira considered this. "That sounds like fun, but I should probably finish my tour first. I haven't seen a peaceful planet yet, and I'm very curious about them." And so the tour continued. Each stop brought new revelations about the galaxy's complete inability to cope with Kira's cheerful competence. On Grumbleton 4, she accidentally solved a centuries-old territorial dispute by suggesting that both sides were probably just hungry and needed a good meal. Her subsequent cooking demonstration created a fusion cuisine that was so delicious it became the basis for a new peace treaty. On Nervington Prime, she helped a group of anxiety-prone jitterlings overcome their fear of the dark by showing them how to make friends with shadows. The technique involved a simple breathing exercise she'd learned while hiding from plasma storms, and it worked so well that the jitterlings' entire civilization underwent a cultural renaissance. But perhaps the most significant incident occurred on Middleton Station, a diplomatic hub where representatives from dozens of species came to negotiate treaties and trade agreements. Kira arrived during a particularly tense negotiation between the Grumplings and the Pessimists, 2 species that had been feuding for so long they'd forgotten what they were fighting about. "Oh, you're having a disagreement," Kira observed, watching the 2 delegations shout at each other across a conference table. "This is wonderful. I love watching beings work through their differences." Both sides stopped arguing and stared at her. "Wonderful," sputtered Ambassador Grouchington of the Grumplings. "This is a serious diplomatic crisis." "Oh, I know. That's what makes it so exciting. Back home, when the flame serpents and the ice beetles have disagreements, they usually try to kill each other, but it always ends with them sharing territory and recipes. Conflict resolution is like cooking. You just have to know how to blend the flavors." The pessimist delegation, led by Councillor Doomsworth, looked horrified. "You think this is entertaining? Well, yes. Look at all the passion you're putting into this. You clearly care very deeply about whatever you're discussing. That's beautiful." "We're discussing mineral rights to the asteroid belt of eternal sorrow," Grouchington snapped. "Oh, how lovely. You're both trying to take care of something important. That shows real responsibility." The two ambassadors looked at each other with sudden confusion. Neither had considered that their aggressive posturing might actually demonstrate caring. "But," Doomsworth said slowly, "we hate each other." "Do you really?" Kira asked with genuine curiosity. "Or do you just have different ideas about how to take care of the same thing?" What followed was the most successful diplomatic negotiation in recorded galactic history. Within 2 hours, the Grumplings and Pessimists had not only resolved their asteroid dispute, but had also formed a joint mining consortium, established a cultural exchange program, and planned a festival celebrating their newly discovered friendship. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps was baffled. Ambassador Grouchington and Councillor Doomsworth, who had been screaming at each other for decades, were now sharing lunch and discussing vacation plans. "How did you do that?" asked the station's chief mediator, a professional diplomat with 40 years of experience. "Oh, I didn't do anything," Kira smiled. "I just listened. They were already agreeing with each other. They just didn't realize it yet." The mediator, who had spent his entire career trying to understand the subtleties of interspecies conflict resolution, began to suspect that perhaps the solution wasn't subtle at all. Perhaps it was just a matter of paying attention to what beings actually wanted, instead of what they said they wanted. Word of the miraculous mediation spread throughout the diplomatic community faster than a subspace transmission. Within days, Kira was receiving requests to observe negotiations throughout the galaxy. Not to participate, nobody was quite ready for that, but just to be present with her peculiar ability to see the obvious things that everyone else missed. But the real turning point came when she decided to visit her first truly peaceful planet. New Tranquility was famous throughout the galaxy for being the most serene world in known space. No conflicts, no predators, no natural disasters, just gentle rolling hills, babbling brooks, and beings who spent their days in quiet contemplation. Kira stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately began to worry. "Are you sure everyone here is okay?" she asked Captain Fizzbottom, looking around at the pastoral landscape. "They all seem very still." "That's the point. This is what a peaceful civilization looks like." "But where's the energy, the excitement, the sense of aliveness?" She walked through the planet's capital city, which was more like a collection of meditation gardens, with buildings scattered throughout. The local tranquil ones moved slowly and spoke softly, their entire culture dedicated to the elimination of stress and conflict. "Welcome, peaceful visitor," said Elder Serenity, the planet's spiritual leader. "We hope you find the calm you seek." "Oh, I'm not looking for calm," Kira laughed. "I'm looking for life. You know, the messy, complicated, wonderful stuff that makes existence interesting." Elder Serenity looked confused. "But conflict is the source of suffering. We have eliminated it entirely." "You've eliminated conflict, all of it, even the good kind?" "There is no good kind of conflict, young one." Kira stared at her for a moment, then began to look genuinely sad. "But what about the excitement of overcoming challenges, the joy of growing stronger, the thrill of discovering you can do things you never thought possible? Those things lead to chaos and disorder." "No, they lead to life. Look, I understand wanting to be safe. Safety is important, but you can't grow if you never face anything difficult." Over the next few days, Kira watched the tranquil ones go about their carefully regulated lives. They woke at the same time, ate the same food, had the same conversations, and went to sleep at the same time. It was peaceful, certainly, but it was also empty. "This is the saddest place I've ever been," she told Captain Fizzbottom on their third day. "And I grew up on a planet where the rocks try to eat you." "How can you say that? These people are perfectly content." "Are they? Or are they just waiting?" That evening, Kira did something that would later be remembered as either the most kindly or most disruptive act in New Tranquility's history. She organized a music session. "I'd like to teach you all a song," she announced to a gathering of curious, tranquil ones. "It's called The Harmony of Challenges, and it's about finding beauty in difficult things." The song she taught them was the one she'd learned from the Fragmentoids, a melody that spoke of surviving impossible odds, of finding joy in the face of danger, of growing stronger through adversity. But when the tranquil ones sang it, something magical happened. Their carefully controlled voices began to carry emotions they had forgotten they possessed. Hope, excitement, wonder. The very feelings they had spent generations trying to eliminate began to flow through their music like water through a long, dry riverbed. Elder Serenity, who had not felt a genuine emotion in decades, began to cry. What is this feeling?" she whispered. "That's aliveness," Kira said gently. "It's what happens when you remember that existence is supposed to be an adventure, not a waiting room." The consequences of that evening would reshape New Tranquility's entire civilization. The tranquil ones, who had spent centuries avoiding anything that might disturb their peace, began to rediscover the joy of learning, of growing, of facing challenges and overcoming them. They didn't become violent or chaotic, they became vibrant. 6 months later, New Tranquility had established its first university, launched its first space exploration program, and begun the galaxy's most ambitious, peaceful colonization project. They kept their commitment to non-violence, but they embraced the beautiful chaos of actually living. "How did you know?" Elder Serenity asked Kira during her farewell visit. "How did you know we needed to remember how to feel?" "Because," Kira said with a smile, "I've spent my whole life in a place where feeling is the difference between surviving and thriving. You can't appreciate peace if you've never known struggle, and you can't grow if you're never challenged. The secret isn't avoiding danger, it's learning to dance with it." By now, word of Kira's unique gift had spread throughout the galaxy. She wasn't just a human who had survived a Deathworld. She was a being who had learned to find joy in impossible circumstances, and somehow her presence helped others remember how to be truly alive. The Galactic Council, recognizing that they were dealing with something unprecedented, created a new position just for her, Ambassador of Beneficial Disruption. Her job description was beautifully simple: go places and be yourself. But the real test came when she received a message from the most unexpected source. The Fragmentoids of Mortifax 7 had sent a delegation to find her. They traveled in a ship that was essentially a flying bunker, designed to protect its occupants from the countless dangers of space travel. "Goddess Kira," said Fragment Leader Crystalline, using the title they had given her years ago, "we have come to ask for your help." "Oh my, what's wrong?" "Our world is changing. Since you left, the screaming crystals have been singing your friendship songs. The deathworms have been leaving flowers instead of corpses. Even the acid geysers seem less acidic. We fear we are losing our Deathworld status." Kira looked concerned. "Are you unhappy about that?" We don't know. For millennia we have defined ourselves by our ability to survive the impossible. But now survival is becoming easier. We are confused." "Oh," Kira's face lit up with understanding. "You're afraid that if your world becomes less dangerous, you won't be special anymore." "Yes, we are the survivors of Mortifax 7. But if Mortifax 7 is no longer unsurvivable, then who are we?" Kira thought about this for a moment, then smiled. "You're the people who learned to find beauty in the midst of terror." You're the ones who built a civilization in conditions that would destroy most species. You're the beings who taught a lost human child how to make friends with danger itself. That's who you are. But what if our world becomes ordinary? Then you'll be the extraordinary people who live on an ordinary world. Don't you see? You've already proven you can survive anything. Now you get to prove you can thrive when you don't have to. The fragmentoids looked at each other with growing wonder. They had never considered that their greatest challenge might not be surviving their world, but learning to live fully once survival was assured. Besides, Kira added with a grin, I happen to know that Mortifact 7 isn't becoming ordinary. It's becoming something new, a place where danger and beauty exist together, where strength and kindness are the same thing. You're not losing your Deathworld. You're gaining a life world. The fragmentoids returned to Mortifact 7 with a new understanding of their purpose. They began to share their survival techniques with other species, teaching them how to find strength in adversity and beauty in challenge. Mortifact 7 became known throughout the galaxy as the place where beings went to learn how to truly live. But perhaps the most significant change was in Kira herself. Through her travels, she'd begun to understand that her unique upbringing had given her something precious, the ability to see the potential for joy in any situation, no matter how impossible it seemed. She established what became known as the Kira Principle, that every being, no matter how different or dangerous or damaged, had something beautiful to offer the universe. Her role became helping others discover their own hidden gifts, their own capacity for growth and wonder. The galaxy, which had once been divided into neat categories of safe and dangerous, civilized and primitive, began to realize that perhaps the most important divisions were between those who embraced the adventure of existence and those who merely endured it. Kira never did find that normal planet she had initially been curious about. She discovered that normal was just another word for hasn't realized its potential yet. Every world she visited, every species she encountered, every being she met, had depths of wonder and possibility that were waiting to be explored. Years later, when beings throughout the galaxy told stories of the human who had grown up on a Deathworld, they didn't focus on her ability to survive impossible dangers. They talked about her gift for helping others discover that they were stronger, kinder, and more capable than they had ever imagined. The bureaucrat who had made the filing error that started it all, Blimp Noodlewisk, was eventually promoted to head of the Department of Beneficial Accidents. His new job was to identify and nurture the kind of beautiful mistakes that could change the universe for the better. And Kira, she kept a small apartment on 17 different worlds, each one a testament to the simple truth that home isn't a place where you're safe from everything. It's a place where you're free to become everything you were meant to be. The most dangerous human in the galaxy turned out to be dangerous only to the idea that beings had to choose between safety and adventure, between peace and growth, between surviving and thriving. She proved that the best way to handle an impossible life was to live it with impossible joy. In the end, the galaxy learned that sometimes the most terrifying thing you can encounter is someone who refuses to be afraid of living fully. But Kira's story was far from over. The Department of Beneficial Accidents had been monitoring what they now called the Kira effect across 17 different star systems, and the results were both magnificent and completely unpredictable. Planets that had been stagnant for millennia were suddenly experiencing cultural revolutions. Species that had given up on exploration were launching ambitious missions to previously unexplored sectors. And perhaps most remarkably, the galaxy's suicide rates had dropped to nearly zero. It's the most extraordinary thing, Dr. Wobblestein Flapperdoodle told the emergency session of the Galactic Council. Wherever she goes, beings suddenly remember that existence is supposed to be, well, interesting. The council chamber, a vast amphitheater that had witnessed countless debates about trade regulations and territorial disputes, was now grappling with something entirely unprecedented, how to handle a human who was accidentally fixing everything simply by being enthusiastic about life. "Councillor Grumpington," said the Grand Speaker, "your report on the grumpling, pessimist situation." Ambassador Grouchington, who had previously been known for his ability to find fault with anything, stood up with what could only be described as a genuine smile. "Honoured colleagues, I am pleased to report that our ancient feud has been, well, it seems rather silly now, actually. We've decided to focus our energies on more productive pursuits. Such as? We're opening a joint restaurant chain called Grumpy Pessimist's Surprisingly Delightful Bistro. Our first location exceeded profit projections by 400%, primarily because our customers find our brutally honest food reviews refreshingly authentic." The council stared at him in bewilderment. This was the same ambassador who had once started a 3-year diplomatic crisis over a misplaced comma in a trade agreement. And the pessimists. Councillor Doomsworth has discovered that predicting worst-case scenarios is actually an invaluable skill for disaster preparedness. They've become the galaxy's premier emergency planning consultants. Apparently, assuming everything will go wrong makes you excellent at preventing things from going wrong. The Grand Speaker made a note that would later become legendary in bureaucratic circles. Item 847. Consider possibility that all previous diplomatic methods were missing the point entirely. Meanwhile, on Mortifax 7, something unprecedented was happening. The planet that had once been classified as utterly unsurvivable was experiencing what xenogeologists were calling environmental optimization through impossible means. The acid geysers had somehow learned to regulate their pH levels, creating natural hot springs that were not only safe but actually therapeutic. The screaming crystals continued their warning songs, but now they harmonized with the planet's wind patterns to create what visitors described as the most hauntingly beautiful music in the known universe. And the Deathworms? They had established the galaxy's first extreme survival training academy, where beings from across the cosmos came to learn the fragmentoid techniques for thriving under impossible conditions. Student Evaluation Report read the Academy's first graduate review. Professor Squiggles demonstrates remarkable patience in teaching the Making Friends with Mortal Danger curriculum. His interpretive dance explanations of proper acid-dodging techniques are both informative and surprisingly moving. 5 stars. Would recommend to anyone seeking to understand the true meaning of resilience. But the real revelation came when the Galactic Safety Bureau decided to conduct a comprehensive study of what they termed the Thornwick phenomenon. They assembled a team of the galaxy's most brilliant scientists, philosophers, and sociologists to answer one simple question: how? Dr. Bingleberry Woozlenook, the team's lead researcher, had spent 40 years studying impossible phenomena across the galaxy. She had investigated planets where mathematics worked backwards, species that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, and a black hole that had somehow learned to play jazz music. But Kira's case was proving to be the most baffling mystery she had ever encountered. "The human demonstrates no special powers," she reported to her team. "No psychic abilities, no manipulation of quantum fields, no violation of known physical laws. She simply exists with complete enthusiasm, and somehow that transforms everything around her." "But surely there must be some scientific explanation," protested Dr. Flibberty Gibbet, the team's expert on impossible biology. "That's what we thought, so we ran every test imaginable. We analyzed her cellular structure, mapped her neural patterns, studied her genetic code, even examined her quantum signature. Do you know what we found?" "What?" "She's completely, utterly, magnificently normal. She's just a human being who grew up under extraordinary circumstances and decided that life was wonderful instead of terrible." The research team sat in stunned silence. They had expected to discover some hidden mutation, some secret power, some cosmic anomaly that would explain Kira's impossible effect on everything around her. "So you're saying," Dr. Flibbertigibbet said slowly, "that she's changing the galaxy simply by being happy. Not just happy, authentically happy. She genuinely believes that existence is a gift, that challenges are opportunities, that every being has infinite potential for growth and wonder, and somehow that belief is contagious." This discovery triggered what historians would later call the great philosophical crisis of the 42nd century. If a single being's attitude could transform entire civilizations, what did that say about the nature of reality itself? Universities across the galaxy began offering courses in applied optimism and constructive enthusiasm theory. The Cynical Studies Department at the University of Perpetual Gloom found itself completely defunded when all their students transferred to the newly created Department of Impossible Joy. But perhaps the most significant change occurred on Earth itself. When news of Kira's adventures reached humanity's homeworld, the response was typically human. "Wait a minute," shouted President Bafflebonk at the Emergency Earth Council meeting. "You're telling me that one of our people has been accidentally conquering the galaxy through the power of positive thinking?" That appears to be an accurate summary, yes," replied Ambassador Snufflebottom, who had just returned from the galactic capital with a briefcase full of reports that read like science fiction novels written by optimistic philosophers. "And the aliens are terrified of this. Well, not exactly terrified, more like overwhelmed by the sudden realization that they've been approaching existence completely wrong for the past several million years." President Bafflebonk sat back in his chair and began to laugh. "So, let me get this straight. The galaxy spends eons developing advanced technology, complex political systems, and sophisticated military strategies, and then one human kid who grew up playing with deadly plants accidentally shows them that none of that matters as much as just being genuinely excited to be alive? That's correct, sir. That is the most human thing I've ever heard." The Earth Council's response was to immediately establish the Department of Accidental Galactic Improvement and begin a systematic study of what they termed humanity's inexplicable talent for making everything better through sheer stubborn optimism. But back in space, Kira was facing a new challenge. The Galactic Council had decided that her influence was too valuable to risk losing, so they had assigned her a security detail consisting of the galaxy's most elite protection specialists. The problem was that the security team, despite being comprised of the most competent bodyguards in known space, were absolutely terrified of their assignment. "Ma'am," said Captain Nervarek, the team leader, "we've reviewed your daily routine, and we have some concerns." "Oh, like what?" Kira asked cheerfully, completely oblivious to the fact that her daily routine read like a manual for creative suicide. "Well, for starters, your morning jog. You run through the asteroid field of certain death while doing interpretive dance to communicate with the space whales. They like the exercise, and the dancing helps them with their migration patterns. Ma'am, space whales are the size of small moons, and their songs can shatter starship hulls." "I know. Isn't their music amazing? They've been teaching me some new harmonies." Captain Nervarek looked at his notes with the expression of a being who was questioning every life choice that had led him to this moment. "Then there's your lunch routine. You eat with the void sharks. They're excellent conversationalists once you learn their dialect. Ma'am, void sharks exist in a state of quantum uncertainty, and their feeding habits violate several laws of physics. That's what makes mealtime so interesting. You never know if lunch is going to happen in this dimension or the next one." The security team exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their collective mental state. They had volunteered for this assignment because protecting the galaxy's most important diplomatic asset seemed like a worthy challenge. They had not anticipated that the biggest threat to their target would be her own enthusiasm for activities that should be impossible. "Perhaps," Captain Nervarek suggested carefully, "we could discuss implementing some basic safety protocols." Oh, that's very thoughtful, but I wouldn't want to limit the experiences of the beings I meet. Safety protocols tend to make people nervous, and nervous beings are much less likely to discover their hidden potential. Ma'am, with all due respect, your idea of hidden potential seems to involve teaching entire species to do things that their physiology says they can't do. Well, physiology is more like guidelines, don't you think? I mean, look at the wobbling jellies. The wobbling jellies were a species of sentient gelatin from the quivering nebula. They had evolved as peaceful filter feeders with all the structural integrity of grape jelly. After spending a week with Kira, they had somehow learned to forge metal with their bare hands and had established the galaxy's first jelly-based construction company. Ma'am, the wobbling jellies are now building starships out of materials they shouldn't be able to touch, using techniques that don't appear in any engineering manual. I know! Isn't that wonderful? They're so proud of themselves, and their ships are surprisingly comfortable. All those curves make for very soothing flight experiences. Captain Nervarek made another note. Item 23. Request transfer to assignment involving predictable dangers, such as defusing quantum bombs or negotiating with rabid hyperbeasts. But the real challenge came when Kira received an invitation that made the entire Galactic Council break into nervous sweats. The Interdimensional Congress of Impossible Things wanted to meet her. The what now? Asked Captain Fizzbottom, who had by this point become something between Kira's official escort and her unofficial chronicler of accidentally miraculous events. Oh, it's very exciting! Kira bounced with enthusiasm. They're beings that exist in the spaces, between realities. They've heard about my adventures, and they want to know if I'd like to visit their dimension for tea. Ma'am? Captain Nervarek interrupted, his voice carrying the tone of a being who had reached his absolute limit. Beings that exist between realities are, by definition, impossible. Meeting with them could potentially unravel the fabric of space-time itself. But they said they have cookies. And there it was. The most dangerous human in the galaxy was going to risk the structural integrity of reality itself because interdimensional beings had offered her baked goods. The emergency session of the Galactic Council that followed would go down in history as the day democracy nearly died from collective nervous breakdown. We cannot, declared Councillor Stuffington of the Rigid Conformity Coalition, allow a single being to potentially endanger all of existence for cookies. But, countered Councillor Fluffernutter of the recently converted Optimist Party, consider the possibilities. If she can help impossible beings, imagine what we might learn. What we might learn, Stuffington shot back, is what it feels like to have our atoms scattered across 17 different realities. The debate continued for 14 hours, with representatives from across the galaxy arguing about whether Kira's interdimensional tea party represented the greatest opportunity or the greatest threat in galactic history. Finally, Elder Crystalline of the Fragmentoids stood to speak. As the representative of the beings who had actually raised Kira, her words carried special weight. "Honored colleagues," she said, her crystalline voice ringing through the chamber, "you speak of risk as if existence itself is not already the greatest risk any of us take every day. Kira Thornwick has taught us that the choice is not between safety and danger. It is between living fully and merely surviving. But what if she accidentally destroys everything? Then we will have been destroyed by someone who was trying to have tea with impossible beings because she thought it would be interesting. As ways to end existence go, that strikes me as remarkably optimistic." The vote was close, 847 in favor of allowing the interdimensional meeting, 846 opposed, and 1 abstention from Councillor Bewildered, who later admitted he had been too overwhelmed by the philosophical implications to make a decision. And so preparations began. for what would either be the most significant diplomatic contact in galactic history or the most enthusiastic ending to reality anyone had ever imagined. Kira, completely oblivious to the cosmic significance of her interdimensional tea date, spent the days leading up to the meeting baking cookies of her own. Her recipe, which involved ingredients that technically shouldn't exist in the same dimensional space, created treats that somehow tasted like the memory of joy itself. The secret, she explained to her bewildered security team, is to bake with love for beings you haven't met yet, but already consider friends. Captain Nervarek, who had by this point given up any pretense of maintaining his professional composure, simply made one final note in his report. Subject continues to operate under assumption that universe is fundamentally friendly. Evidence suggests universe is adapting to meet her expectations. Now, the day of the interdimensional meeting arrived with appropriate cosmic fanfare. Reality itself seemed to shimmer with anticipation as the barriers between dimensions began to thin. Scientists across the galaxy held their breath. Philosophers questioned everything they thought they knew about existence, and bureaucrats prepared emergency protocols for scenarios they couldn't even properly define. And Kira? She put on her favorite dress, packed her homemade cookies in a basket, and prepared to have tea with beings that shouldn't exist, while somehow maintaining her conviction that this was perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon activity. The interdimensional portal opened with a sound like cosmic wind chimes, played by a jazz ensemble from the fifth dimension. Through the shimmering gateway stepped beings that existed in a state of constant creative impossibility. They were simultaneously made of starlight and crystallized music, existing in all times while belonging to none. "Greetings, Kira Thornwick," they said in voices that sounded like the mathematical harmony of perfectly balanced equations. "We have traveled across the barriers of reality to meet the being who has taught the galaxy to remember joy." "Oh, you must be my tea guests!" Kira beamed at them with the same enthusiasm she showed to everyone, from interdimensional entities to neighborhood deathworms. "I made cookies. I hope you like them. I wasn't sure what impossible beings might enjoy, so I tried to bake something that tastes like happiness." The Interdimensional Congress of Impossible Things, beings that had witnessed the birth and death of entire universes, experienced what they would later describe as the most profound ontological shift in the history of conscious existence. They had expected to meet a being of impossible power. Instead, they found a cheerful young human who offered them cookies and asked if they preferred tea or coffee. We do not typically consume physical matter," one of them said, their form shifting through several states of improbable existence. "Oh, that's okay. The cookies are made with interdimensional flour, so they exist in whatever state you need them to. Would you like to try one?" What happened next would require entirely new branches of mathematics to properly describe. The impossible beings consumed impossible cookies and experienced the impossible sensation of taste for the first time in their timeless existence. The flavor they experienced was, according to their later reports, the essential essence of what mortals call hope, crystallized into edible form. "This is extraordinary," they whispered, their forms stabilizing into something almost comprehensible. "How did you create substance that exists simultaneously as matter, energy, emotion, and pure concept?" "I just wanted them to be nice," Kira said, pouring tea that somehow managed to be exactly the right temperature for beings that existed outside of thermal dynamics. "I figured if you went to all the trouble of crossing dimensional barriers, you deserved something special." The tea party that followed would reshape the fundamental understanding of reality across 17 different planes of existence. The impossible beings, who had spent eons observing the universe with detached curiosity, discovered the revolutionary concept of genuine care for others. "We have watched civilizations rise and fall," they told Kira as they sipped tea that tasted like the sound of gentle rain. We have observed the birth of stars and the dance of galaxies, but we had never understood the significance of kindness. Well, kindness is important, Kira said, offering them more cookies. It's what makes existence worth all the trouble. I mean, life can be challenging and scary and confusing, but if you're kind to each other, then at least you're all being challenged and scared and confused together. The interdimensional beings looked at each other with expressions that defied description. They had just received what might be the most profound philosophical insight in the history of conscious thought, delivered by a human with cookie crumbs on her dress who considered it completely obvious. "Kira Thornwick," they said finally, "we have come to offer you a gift." "Oh, that's very sweet, but you didn't need to bring anything. Your company is gift enough. We wish to offer you the ability to exist in all realities simultaneously. You could experience every possible version of existence, see every potential outcome, understand every mystery of the cosmos." Kira considered this offer with the same thoughtful expression she used when deciding between 17 types of deadly fruit for breakfast. "That sounds amazing, but would I still be me?" "You would be you, but expanded beyond all current limitations. And would I still be able to have tea with friends like this? You would experience friendship across all possible dimensions. But would it feel the same? You know, cozy and warm and simple?" The impossible beings paused. In all their eons of existence, no one had ever turned down omniscience because they were worried it might make tea parties less cozy. We are uncertain. Omniscience tends to make simple pleasures more complex. "Then thank you, but I think I'll stay as I am. I'd rather have one really good cup of tea with new friends than experience every possible cup of tea across all realities. Quality over quantity, you know." The Interdimensional Congress of Impossible Things experienced what they would later describe as the most beautiful moment of befuddlement in the history of consciousness. They had just offered a mortal being the ultimate gift of cosmic awareness, and she had turned it down because she preferred the simple joy of sharing cookies with friends. "You are," they said with something approaching wonder, "the most impossible being we have ever encountered." "Oh, thank you. You're pretty impossible yourselves. I like that about you." The interdimensional tea party concluded with the beings asking if they could visit again sometime. They had discovered that experiencing simple joy was far more interesting than observing cosmic complexity, and they were eager to learn more about what they called the Thornwick approach to existence. As the portal closed and reality settled back into its normal, impossible patterns, the watching galaxy released a collective sigh of relief. Existence had not ended. Instead, it had apparently become more interesting. The official report from the Interdimensional Contact Committee was remarkably brief. Subject: successfully conducted diplomatic tea party with impossible beings. No reality damage detected. Request permission to establish regular interdimensional social calendar. But perhaps the most significant outcome of the interdimensional meeting was not what Kira had learned from the impossible beings, but what they had learned from her. Word of the human who had taught cosmic entities the value of simple kindness spread across dimensions, reaching civilizations that existed in states of reality that didn't even have names yet. Soon, Kira began receiving invitations from beings that transcended every known category of existence. Time travelers wanted to know if she would like to attend history's most important moments. Probability manipulators invited her to dinner in the restaurant at the end of causality. Even the abstract concepts themselves, entities like love, justice, and irony, requested meetings to understand how a simple human had managed to embody their principles so effortlessly. "I don't understand why everyone thinks I'm so special," Kira confided to Captain Fizzbottom as they traveled to their next assignment. "I'm just being myself." "That's exactly the point," he replied, looking out at the stars with an expression of someone who had given up trying to understand the universe and decided to simply appreciate its beautiful absurdity. In a galaxy full of beings trying to be something else, someone who is genuinely themselves becomes the most extraordinary force imaginable. And so Kira Thornwick continued her inadvertent conquest of the universe, one act of authentic kindness at a time. She never did find that normal planet she had originally been curious about, but she had discovered something far more valuable. That normal was not about the absence of danger or difficulty, but about the presence of beings who chose to face whatever came with grace, humor, and an unshakable belief that existence was a gift worth celebrating. The galaxy had learned that the most dangerous human was not dangerous because she could destroy